we do have a problem. You can have the best, most progressive, intelligent legislation that ever existed, but if it is not funded appropriately, it cannot realize its potential. That is where we currently find ourselves. The funding for the Older Americans Act has not kept pace with the growth of the population. As I indicated earlier, when the Older Americans Act was signed into law, there were 17 million persons 65 and older. Today, according to 2010 Census Bureau, there are 40.393 million people 65 and older. Now, we serve as area agencies on aging 60 and older. I'm just talking about the 65 and older population. 40.3 million as compared to 17 million in 1965. Significant increase. And in the next 30 years, the number of people 65 and older will double to 80 million. But these wrinkles will be anything but uniform. The face of aging is changing as the elderly population in the U.S. becomes more racially, ethnically, and socially diverse. Consider this. Currently, 1 of 5 older Americans are members of a racial or ethnic minority. By 2030, the number is projected to be 1 in 3. By 2050, Latinos are projected to make up 20% of those 65 and older. Nearly 12% of seniors are separated or divorced, almost 3 times as many as in 1970. There will be a projected 200% increase in Asian and Pacific Islander populations during the next few decades. This is just a few data points to help us understand the change that's going on in our country as it relates to older adults. But here in Kentucky, we have some interesting statistics as well. Kentucky's total population in 2010 was 4,314,113 and is expected to increase to an estimated 4.5 million by 2030. The largest proportion of persons contributing to that increase is baby boomer generation. In 2010, the population 60 and older in Kentucky contributed to 18.8% of the total population. By 2030, right here in Kentucky, 25.6%. That's 1 in 4 persons, 1 in 4 Kentuckians will be 60 years old or older. Currently, those who are the oldest of old in our state make up 1.7% of Kentucky's total population. That's 85 and older, and that is the fastest growing age group in our country, including in Kentucky. So Kentucky remains homogeneous state. It's not as diverse as our country overall, but some of the data points related to diversity, et cetera, are not as significant, but they do need to be considered. In this slide, however, we want to look at some of the disparaging information as it relates to our aging population. Even with this growth in the aging population, funding has not kept pace. As you can see in this slide, in 1980, federal funding committed per person 65 and older was $9.24 per adult, 65 plus. In 2010, $3.85 per adult 65 plus. That's very, very important information. That's the federal funding. Although I do not have the actual numbers in Kentucky, we have experienced similar diminishing of expenditures per person 60 plus as a result of funding cuts over the past 11 years. The older adult programs, the aging programs that are specifically funded through state funds at the Cabinet for Health and Family Services has literally been cut at some level, whether 1% or 11% over the past 11 years. And we know because the population is growing so significantly, even if you're not cut, if funding remains flat, it still exists as a cut. The amount spent per person continues to decrease. And consider this as it relates to our inflationary rate. That is even more significant. We do have a problem which requires careful consideration and thoughtfulness. This slide helps us to see overall, this one here, the potential impact of our issue from the federal expenditure side. At the bottom, that's the number of persons receiving Older American Act services. In the next 3 color areas, that's the age of people 60 and above below poverty level, 200% poverty level, and then below 50%, 250% poverty level. And then that large orange space is the number of persons age 60 and above. So there's huge disparity in terms of the number of people existing in our communities, including those who need our services and those who are being served. Obviously, as we contemplate how we can get into the Act this year and during Older Americans Act Month, we must ask ourselves if this act is the Older Americans Act. I believe the Older Americans Act will always be with us in some capacity. I'm not so sure that we're ever going to get the amount of money appropriated to the Older Americans Act to provide the service need that is required in our communities. Now I want to go back to something I said earlier. I don't believe that it was ever intended to be the do-all in terms of funding for our communities, but definitely it should have kept up with funding levels that are consistent with the increase in the population. But I'm not sure if we're ever going to even get to that particular point. I believe the Older Americans Act will be with us always, but it is obviously floundering. It has done great work, but it is the catalyst to catapult us into the current realm of need. Or is it the catalyst to catapult us into the current realm of need and prepare us to continue to be relevant in serving our older adult community in the future? The answer to this question is simply this. Change is imminent. We must embrace the changing times and change our focus in our system of business in order to remain relevant. This changing aging network must occur. This slide just gives some information about some changes that are already occurring within our Area Agency on Aging network, within the network as a whole. Now I'll just reference some of these because these changes have actually occurred here in the Green River area as well as in other AAAs in our state. One thing that is really obvious and is important for us to know and understand is that first bullet. Decreases in traditional funding sources has led to more AAAs diversifying their funding. Older Americans Act fund for most AAAs is 35% of the budget. I believe here in Kentucky we're right at 33%. Statewide of the overall aging budget is Older Americans Act funds. Over time, AAAs have been serving broader populations. That's definitely a fact with Green River here as well as my area agency on aging. We serve more than individuals 60 and older. Some other diversification includes evidence-based programming, but also care transitions, private pay initiatives, etc. We need to continue to launch out and to diversify the mechanisms that we use to acquire funding. We must embrace the changing times and change our focus in our system of business in order to remain relevant. Again, change in our network is imminent. As we consider recognizing older adults during this Older Americans Month and acknowledge the theme, get into the act, we must recognize that the face of aging is changing. Older adults are living longer and healthier, more vibrant lives. The fastest rate of growth is that 85+ population, and the number of centenarians has nearly doubled in the last 20 years, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. The face of aging is becoming more and more diverse, and there is a shift in the attitude of older adults. There's definitely a shift. The baby boomers are not just coming anymore, the baby boomers are here. Older adults are more bold, audacious, intentional, deliberately doing what they want to do. And I think they're going to deliberately demand what they want. And we need to be prepared for that. But we will continue to need good systems of care for the very frail and vulnerable, those who need circles of support to help them age in place, age with dignity, age well, and have quality of life. How do we see aging? How do you see aging? I thought this particular fellow was very, very powerful because ageism still exists in our society today. And many people see older adults as fragile, a burden, incapable, and many, many other negative terms are associated with aging. Most people don't even want to say that they're aging. Now I want to ask you all, what is the alternative? All right. So we all want to age, but we want to age in a very, very productive and positive way. And just see the difference. That is so dramatic. This person sees herself as strong, independent, a business owner with many, many possibilities, including hiking the Appalachian Trail. So how do we see aging? How do you see aging? How must I see aging? We must ask ourselves that question. The challenge for those who work in the field of aging is how to evolve along with the changing face of aging. Beyond recognizing the needs of each individual, there are implications for staff training and development, an evolution of activities offered, languages used, food served, and particularly the assumptions we make about the lives and families of the older adults we serve. Hopefully, we will be able to see opportunity and not just the problems that are staring us in the face every day. The problems are real. There is no denying that. But seize the opportunity to turn it around and look at every challenge as an opportunity for impacting change. Change that will touch the lives of every citizen living in our communities in a positive way. Let's embrace that change that must occur so that we remain relevant for our communities. I was looking around the room at your themes on the wall, which are so powerful. In order to remain relevant, you must have credibility, be honest, ethical, and trustworthy. You must treat everyone fairly, be fair, impartial, and equitable in everything we do. But you also must strive for excellence. In order for us to stay relevant, we must strive for excellence. And we must continue to embrace the change that must occur so that we may remain relevant for our communities. Embrace your mission. I'm assuming that these themes are part of your mission here at the Green River Area Development District. Surround yourself with people on the same mission as you. Obviously, they're all on the same mission. They look like they're ready to have a lot of fun. The Older Americans Act theme is getting into the act. I say that we are in the act. We need to figure out how we are going to stay in the act of staying relevant and implementing our mission to serve our communities over the next several decades. Thank you.